Welcome to Echo and Ash, and thank you for tuning in to another original audio experience. Today, we are continuing the storyline titled Dead Embers. This is episode 4. Please sit back, relax, and let the story unfold.
The heavy studded tires of the police cruiser screamed against the iced-over asphalt as Park Ranger Maya Lin slammed the accelerator to the floorboard. The vehicle lurched backward into the blinding whiteout, fishtailing violently, but the massive, frost-bitten mandrill on the hood refused to be dislodged. Its heavily muscled arms, thick as steel cables, gripped the edges of the hood. The primate's face was pressed flush against the reinforced windshield, a horrifying mask of necrotic gray skin, ruptured blood vessels, and jagged 2-inch canines. Thick, hot saliva sprayed from its jaws, instantly freezing into a web of opaque ice against the glass. The Lyssavirus anomaly had pushed the animal's biology into a state of total overdrive. It shrieked, a wet, tearing sound that vibrated through the metal frame of the cruiser, and brought its heavy fist down on the glass again. A spider web of cracks exploded across the driver's side of the windshield. A fine dusting of glass powder fell onto Maya's lap. "Get off!" Maya screamed, her voice raw with pure, unfiltered panic. She cranked the steering wheel hard to the right. The heavy cruiser snapped sideways, the rear tires catching the deep snowbank lining the Miller Farm's driveway. The vehicle slammed into the compacted ice with a bone-jarring crunch. The sudden loss of momentum was catastrophic for the infected beast. The mandrill lost its grip, sliding across the slick, wet metal of the hood, and tumbled off the side, hitting the frozen earth with a heavy, sickening thud. Maya didn't wait to see if it was dead. She knew it wasn't. She threw the transmission into drive, the engine roaring as the studded chains bit into the ice, and the cruiser tore out of the driveway, blindly accelerating into the storm. She drove for 2 miles, her hands locked onto the steering wheel with a death grip, her chest heaving as she hyperventilated. The freezing wind howled through the spiderweb cracks in the windshield. Only when she was certain the road behind her was empty did she ease off the gas, allowing the cruiser to slide to a halt in the center of the abandoned county road. Maya grabbed the radio microphone. Her hands were shaking so violently she dropped it onto the floorboards before snatching it back up by the coiled cord. "Station, this is Lynn," she gasped, her voice trembling. "Elias, Aris, are you there? Copy. Please, copy." The radio crackled, the static thick and oppressive before Sheriff Elias Vance's deep, steady voice broke through. "Maya, we read you. Calm down. What happened at the Miller farm?" "It's here," Maya choked out, wiping a mixture of sweat and melted snow from her forehead. "The animal, it was a primate, a massive one. It attacked the cruiser, but Elias, it wasn't just the animal." Back at the Oakhaven Sheriff's Station, the glow of the emergency generator cast long, harsh shadows against the walls of the dispatch room. Elias gripped the edge of the radio console, his knuckles turning white. Beside him, Dr. Aris Thorne leaned in, his face drawn and pale, a profound dread pooling in his stomach. "What do you mean, Maya?" Elias demanded softly. "Tom Miller," Maya's voice cracked over the speaker. "He's dead. Or, he was dead. Elias, he came out of the house. He was completely gray. His veins were black. He had a bite on his arm and he charged me. He didn't say a word. He snarled like a rabid dog. He tried to kill me." The silence in the dispatch room was absolute, save for the rhythmic, hollow ticking of the wall clock. Aris closed his eyes, pressing the heels of his hands against his forehead. The theory had become a reality. The species barrier had been breached. The Lyssavirus anomaly was now a human pathogen. Maya, are you injured? Aris asked, leaning over the microphone, his medical training fighting through the rising panic. Did either of them bite you? Did you get any saliva or blood in your eyes or mouth? No, Maya breathed. No, I shot Tom, twice in the chest. It didn't even slow him down, Aris. The monkey, the mandrill. It dropped off the porch and attacked him. They tore each other apart in the snow. That's how I got away. Listen to me very carefully, Maya, Elias said, his voice taking on the uncompromising tone of a man preparing for a siege. You do not stop your vehicle again. You drive straight back to the station. We are locking down this building. No one gets in or out without my authorization. Do you understand? I understand, Maya replied. But Elias, Caleb is up there. He's his own. The storm raged with indifferent cruelty, but the woods surrounding the Miller farm were unnaturally still. Caleb Thorne emerged from the tree line like a ghost, his snowshoes strapped to his back, his heavy bolt-action rifle raised and pressed tightly into his shoulder. He had heard the faint, muffled cracks of Maya's 9mm Glock echoing through the valley, followed by the distant roar of her cruiser's engine fading into the blizzard. But by the time he reached the perimeter of the farm, the property was submerged in silence. The sprawling farmhouse was completely dark. The front storm door was shattered, swinging lazily on its hinges, banging against the doorframe with a hollow, rhythmic thud. Caleb moved with slow, tactical precision. He swept the beam of his heavy-duty headlamp across the snow-covered yard. He saw the dark, frozen mass of Buster, the German shepherd, lying near the porch, and then he saw the battlefield. The snow at the base of the porch steps was completely destroyed, churned into a horrific slurry of mud, ice, and massive amounts of blood. Lying in the center of carnage was Tom Miller. Caleb approached cautiously, keeping his rifle leveled at the man's head. Tom was missing a massive portion of his throat. His chest was perforated by 2 bullet wounds, the fabric of his flannel shirt charred by the muzzle flash. He was undeniably dead, but the terrifying hallmark of the virus was still evident. The snow beneath Tom's body had melted down to the frozen earth, and steam was still rising from the corpse, carrying the acrid stench of a pathogen that had literally boiled the man's blood before his heart had finally stopped beating. Caleb knelt down, ignoring the metallic smell of copper. He examined the wound on Tom's left arm. It was a dog bite. The timeline clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The infected mandrill had come down from the mountain and attacked Buster. The dog, driven into a sudden, viral frenzy, had bitten Tom when the farmer came out to investigate. The incubation period was staggering. It had taken less than an hour for the Lyssavirus to completely rewrite Tom Miller's central nervous system. Caleb stood up, aiming his light at the shattered front door of the farmhouse. Tom Miller didn't live alone. He had a 16-year-old son, Jake, the teenager who had abandoned his truck in the ditch earlier that evening. If Tom had turned inside the house before coming out to attack Maya, there was a very real chance the boy was still inside, dead, or worse, infected. Caleb chambered a round in his rifle, the heavy brass cartridge sliding into the breech with a sharp clack. He stepped onto the icy wood of the porch, his boots making no sound, and pushed the shattered door open. The interior of the farmhouse was freezing, completely devoid of heat due to the power outage. The air felt heavy, saturated with the smell of old wood, stale tobacco, and an underlying scent of pure adrenaline. Caleb swept his light across the living room. Furniture was overturned, A lamp lay shattered on the rug. A trail of dark necrotic blood led from the kitchen, through the living room, and out the front door. Tom's path. "Jake," Caleb called out, keeping his voice low, tight, and controlled. "Jake, it's Caleb Thorne. I'm a friend of Elias and Maya. Are you in here?" The house swallowed his voice. The wind outside howled, rattling the window panes in their wooden frames. Caleb moved methodically, clearing the first floor. Kitchen, empty. Dining room, empty. His light caught a smear of bloody handprints on the wall near the staircase leading to the second floor. He moved up the stairs, placing his weight on the edges of the wooden treads to prevent them from creaking. The second floor consisted of a narrow hallway and 3 closed doors. Master bedroom, bathroom, Jake's bedroom. Caleb approached the door at the end of the hall. Jake's room. It was closed, but the wood near the doorknob was splintered, as if someone had violently hammered against it from the outside before giving up. Caleb pressed his ear against the cold wood. For a long moment, there was nothing, and then he heard it, a faint, rapid, terrified wheezing. Someone trying to suppress a sob and failing. "Jake," Caleb said, keeping his tone as gentle as he could while gripping a rifle, "I'm coming in. Don't be afraid." Caleb turned the knob and pushed. The door bumped against something heavy. A barricade. Caleb shoved harder, putting his massive shoulder into the wood, scraping a heavy oak dresser across the floorboards until he had enough room to slip inside. He aimed his light at the floor between the bed and the wall. Huddled in the corner, clutching a silver aluminum baseball bat to his chest, was Jake Miller. The boy was trembling violently, his teeth chattering in the freezing dark. He was wearing a t-shirt and jeans, entirely unequipped for the plummeting temperature of the unheated house. His eyes were wide, bloodshot with tears, staring at the beam of Caleb's light like a trapped deer. Don't look at me," Jake whimpered, raising the bat weakly. My dad went crazy. He tried to bite me. He looked dead. He looked like a dead man." Caleb lowered the rifle, resting the barrel toward the floor, though his finger remained dangerously close to the trigger guard. He took a slow step forward, sweeping his light over the boy's exposed arms, his neck, his legs. He was looking for blood. He was looking for torn fabric or the telltale darkening of veins. "Jake, look at me," Caleb commanded, his voice firm but grounding. "Did he bite you? Did he scratch you?" "No," Jake sobbed, shaking his head rapidly. "I locked the door. I pushed the dresser." He hit the door with his face. He just kept hitting it until he heard the police siren outside. Then he ran downstairs. Caleb let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. The boy was clean, traumatized beyond measure, but physically uncompromised. Okay. You did good, kid," Caleb said, reaching into his pack and pulling out a thick, insulated thermal blanket. He tossed it over the shivering teenager. "Wrap up in that. You're going into shock from the cold." "Where is he?" Jake asked, his voice barely a whisper, pulling the metallic blanket tightly around his shoulders. "Where's my dad?" Caleb didn't lie. The wild had taught him that false hope was more dangerous than the bitter truth. "He's gone, Jake. Whatever sickness this is, it took him. He's outside. But we can't stay here. The temperature in this house is going to drop below 0 in the next hour, and we are sitting ducks." "I can't go out there," Jake panicked, backing further into the corner. "There's a monster. A huge gray monster. I saw it out the window. It jumped on the police car. Caleb froze. The mandrill. Maya had said it attacked Tom, and she had driven away. But Caleb hadn't seen the primate's body in the snow. Only Tom's. If the mandrill had survived the fight, it was still out there. Suddenly, a heavy resonant thump echoed from directly above them. The roof. Caleb's head snapped up, aiming his flashlight at the plastered ceiling. Another thump, heavier this time, followed by the agonizing sound of claws dragging across the icy shingles. The beast hadn't fled into the woods. It had circled back. The virus, burning its host from the inside, was drawn to the ambient heat of the house, drawn to the faint scent of human respiration. "Quiet," Caleb hissed, holding a finger to his lips. He raised the rifle, staring at the ceiling. The dragging sound moved across the roof, pacing erratically, moving toward the front of the house. Then silence. Caleb didn't trust the silence. The Lyssavirus anomaly didn't stalk. It assaulted. If it couldn't find a way in from the roof, it would find a window. Crash. The sound of shattering glass erupted from the first floor. Directly beneath them, the living room window had just caved in. "It's inside," Jake gasped, dropping the bat and burying his face in his hands. "Stay here. Do not move," Caleb ordered, his voice dropping to a dangerous, lethal register. Caleb stepped out of the bedroom, moving back into the dark, narrow hallway. He positioned himself at the top of the wooden staircase, giving himself the tactical high ground. He leveled the heavy bolt-action rifle, aiming the crosshairs squarely at the dark landing at the bottom of the stairs. He didn't need to turn on his flashlight. He could hear it, a wet, heavy breathing, rasping like sandpaper against a grate, the sound of massive leather-padded knuckles dragging across the hardwood floor of the living room, and then the heat. Even from 15 feet away, Caleb could feel the unnatural warmth rising up the stairwell, accompanied by the overwhelming stench of sickness, ammonia, and copper. A massive shadow stepped into the doorway at the bottom of the stairs. Caleb clicked his headlamp on. The beam hit the mandrill. It was a nightmare carved out of muscle and rot. Half of its face had been chewed away in its fight with Tom Miller, exposing the bone of its jaw and a row of bloody, shattered teeth. Its left eye was ruined, but its right eye, completely engorged with blood, locked onto Caleb at the top of the stairs. The primate didn't pause to assess the threat. The virus recognized a warm body, an uninfected host. The mandrill shrieked, a sound that shook the dust from the ceiling, and vaulted up the staircase, covering half the distance in a single, terrifying leap. Caleb exhaled, centering the crosshairs on the center of the charging mass. He pulled the trigger. The rifle roared, the muzzle flash illuminating the narrow hallway in a brilliant, violent burst of yellow light. The heavy .308 caliber soft-tip bullet struck the mandrill perfectly in the upper chest. The kinetic force of the round was immense, comparable to being hit by a sledgehammer. The mandrill was thrown backward, crashing down the wooden stairs in a tangle of limbs, hitting the bottom landing with a heavy, sickening thud. Caleb immediately worked the bolt of his rifle. The brass casing flew out, spinning in the dark, pinging against the wall as afresh. Round slid smoothly into the chamber. He kept the weapon shouldered, aiming down at the unmoving mass of fur and gray skin. For 10 agonizing seconds, the house was silent, save for the ringing in Caleb's ears. Downstairs, the mandrill twitched. It shouldn't have been possible. The round had shattered its sternum and likely pulverized its heart and lungs. A grizzly bear would have been dead before it hit the floor. But the Lyssavirus anomaly wasn't relying on the heart. It was a localized electrical storm in the brain, forcing the dead meat to move. Slowly, agonizingly, the mandrill began to drag itself forward. Its back legs were paralyzed, the spinal cord severed by the fall, but its massive arms reached out, its clawed fingers digging deep into the wooden floorboards. It dragged its ruined, bleeding torso up the first step, then the second. Its ruined jaw snapped at the air, frothing white foam, its one good eye fixed on Caleb with mindless, viral hatred. It was coming. Caleb gritted his teeth, resting the crosshairs directly between the primate's eyes. The virus controlled the brain. To kill the host, he had to destroy the command center. "Burn out," Caleb whispered. He pulled the trigger a second time. The round took the mandrill in the skull. The creature's head snapped back violently, and the massive body finally went entirely limp, sliding backward down the few stairs it had managed to climb, coming to rest in a pool of its own boiling, infected blood. Caleb didn't lower the rifle. He stood at the top of the stairs in the freezing dark, watching the steam rise from the carcass. The immediate threat was dead. But as he looked out the shattered living room window into the howling, endless blizzard, he knew the terrifying truth. This was only one passenger from the plane. The cages in the cargo hold had been empty. The embers hadn't just ignited Oakhaven. They were about to burn it to the ground.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed the story, please be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Join us next time for the continuation of this series as the citizens of Oakhaven try to prevent the virus from spreading further. Until then, stay safe, and thanks for listening.